GM, and welcome to From A to Z. I'm Zombie Shepherd, and today we're going to be going through the study about LLM use and cognitive debt. I found this study really interesting, and I saw a lot of people talking about it. And for one, I'm going to just say, I don't dispute any of it whatsoever. So that's not the purpose of this. We're not, as a person who uses AI, I'm not about to come through and be like, oh, this is bullcrap. There's a lot here that I already thought and agreed with, in the sense that, I've always said my big AI motto since it started and since I started getting into it in 2020, 2021, don't use AI for anything you're already good at. Use AI for your deficits. Use AI where you feel like you're weakest. And still, in those cases, especially early on when it was a lot less trustworthy than it is now, always double check the work by asking good questions and revising things in good ways. I've even done the vibe coding, knowing very little about how to code. I've done a vibe coding program and I got something working, and it was by asking good questions. And, that's not really my thing, but it was very interesting to try to do. And I understand programming on a different level than I did before. Now, I'm still not a programmer. So that's where this cognitive debt thing comes in. It's don't use LLMs for things that you're already good at. And of course, using an LLM to write for you is not going to make you a better writer. Anyway, let's dive into it. And also, I'm going to share it on my screen for you. I'm also going to have links, obviously, in the description for this stuff. So this is the actual study. I went straight to the study. It's 160 pages, including references. So it's a solid 140 pages of reading. I did not read every little thing about it because getting into the details of the NERs and NLPs and different things wasn't necessary. Because for one, like I said, I'm not questioning that this is good science. We are going to ask some questions, but not in a we don't believe you type of way, but in a, interesting and being interested in this kind of way. So first of all, they did it with EEG studies, and you can see here the maps of the brain and stuff. Basically, they're saying that it didn't have enough brain activity, that brain activity is very different between the three, and even more different, I guess, between brain and LLM than between brain search LLM. But I'll just read some of the beginning stuff to not taint the information, and then I'll get into my own takeaways and things I thought about it. With today's wide adoption of LLM products like ChatGPT from OpenAI, humans and businesses engage and use LLMs on a daily basis like any other tool. It carries its own set of advantages and limitations. This study focuses on finding out the cognitive cost of using an LLM in the educational context of writing an essay. We assigned participants to 3 groups: LLM, search engine only, brain only group, and where each participant used a designated tool or no tool in the latter to write an essay. We conducted 3 sessions with the same group for each participant. In the 4th session, we asked LLM group participants to use no tools. Oops. Moving things around. Sorry, I'm messing it up. Brain-only group participants were asked to use the LLM, and LLM people were asked to use the other. So they swapped the two in the 4th study. We recruited a total of 54 participants for sessions 1, 2, 3, and 18 participants among them completed session 4. So that was 54 students total between all the first 3 sessions, which was brain, LLM, and search. And then of the 54, 18 returned to be swapped. So there were no more searches, and it was just brain and LLM. If you were in one, you got swapped to the other. Interesting. I don't remember what they said about whether or not what they did about people who were search, whether they put them to brain or LLM. or maybe none of those returned and it was an easy decision. And that was the other thing. I don't remember if it contained in here, but of the 18 that returned, was it a even 9 and 9, or was it like, an uneven split of like LLM people came back, but not as many brain people? Like, not sure what the split was on the session 4. Anyway, we used EEG to record patients' brain activity in order to assess their cognitive engagement and cognitive load, and to gain a deeper understanding of neural activations during the essay writing task. We performed NLP analysis, and we interviewed each participant after each session. We performed scoring with the help from the human teachers and an AI judge, a specially built AI agent. We discovered a consistent homogeneity across the name entities recognition, NERs, engrams, ontology of topics within each group. EEG analysis presented robust evidence that LLM, search engine, and brain-only groups had significantly different neural connectivity patterns, reflecting divergent cognitive strategies. Brain connectivity systematically scaled down with the amount of external support. The brain-only group exhibited the strongest, widest ranging networks. Search engine groups showed intermediate engagement, and LLM assistance elicited the weakest overall coupling. In session 4, LLM to brain participants showed weaker neural connectivity and under engagement of alpha and beta networks. The brain to LLM participants demonstrated higher memory recall and re-engagement of widespread occipitoparietal prefrontal nodes, likely supporting the visual processing similar to the one frequently perceived in the search engine group. The reported ownership of LLM group's essays and the interviews was low. The search engine group had strong ownership, but lesser than the brain-only group. The LLM group also fell behind in their ability to quote from the essays they wrote just minutes prior. As the educational impact of LLM use only begins to settle with the general population in this study, we demonstrate the pressing matter of a likely decrease in learning skills based on the results of our study. The use of LLM had a measurable impact on participants, and while the benefits were initially apparent, as we demonstrated over the course of 4 sessions, which took place over 4 months, the LLM group's participants performed worse than their counterparts in the brain-only group at all levels, neuro-linguistic scoring. We hope this study serves as a preliminary guide to the understanding the cognitive and practical impacts of AI on learning environments. So, then we get it down into the summary of results. I read all of this. So what I ended up reading was basically all of the very beginning of it, everything through this very beginning. And then once it got here to the table of contents, I did initially start to try to read through the whole thing. And I was like, oh, this is very, very, very in-depth. And I don't necessarily need all this. I did skip to the discussion and the conclusion to definitely read those. I may read those, but we may not. The other thing I did was I read all of this different stuff, and there's also a great YouTube video of some people that also went through it, and they went through it in a more in-depth way than I did, than I planned to, as far as like, they went through all these sections and really highlighted a lot of stuff. And a lot of the stuff was after I watched the video after reading most of this. So I don't feel like they got any deeper in the weeds than the average person would need to anyway. So I did do my own set of notes after reading, while reading, and after watching that other video, just kind of thinking about it for myself. I mean, one of my key observations is, once again, not questioning the study whatsoever, but this is a small study, 54 people total, and only 18 on the session that actually gives you the takeaway of cognitive debt. Meaning, like, the cognitive debt is they're saying that using an LLM to help you write a paper doesn't just hurt you once, it hurts you the next time you go to write a paper, because the people who went from LLM to brain had a hard time writing a paper straight from their brain. And that is what they're calling the cognitive debt. So, cognitive, I'm going to just start with my notes. Like I said, I would recommend that you, if you really, really care about this and you really want to dive into it, come read this paper. I'll have it linked. You can do the discussion and the conclusion. I don't think it's important that I go through all of that for you, because I'm sure there's, I'll even link the YouTube video I watched. There's a lot that can dive into the explaining of it. I'm going to just dive into my little thing of doing kind of the, kind of my opinion on it, my editorial opinion. And, like I said, I largely agree with what happened here. Like I said, it is a small study, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong. And I already just vibes based understood that, like, hey, you're not going to get better at doing a thing if you outsource that thing. Using AI is very similar to just like hiring someone else. Like, you don't get better at guitar by hiring a guitarist. You don't get better at guitar by letting an AI write your guitar parts. What I would argue is the good integration of AI or any other learning tool is like, okay, well, if an AI writes for you, or if you want to understand something from an AI, like, you should know that information. You should already go into it, having read a lot. And I talk about that a lot in my material. Like, I read a lot. And then I have discussions with AI that's not a blank slate. So I understand when I see a bias or when I see where it's coming from or whatever. And I can kind of, direct that conversation in a sense. But I'm not like offloading my cognitive ability to it, because I'm coming to it with an understanding. And even if I do come to it with less of an understanding on some subjects, I think that reading and understanding things. And another thing is, like, so you have a conversation that steers you a certain way with AI. Okay, well then say, like, what are your sources for this? And then you can go read it for yourself and understand for yourself after reading source material. I think that, that's something. At the end of the last episode, I said something. I was like, I couldn't think of what it was. And it was source material. Like, I think that in order, like, you should always be looking for source material. And source material is, it can be opinionated, but I think source material seeks to use evidence-based, even if that evidence is based in statistical reality and experience in a lot of cases. And I think that's where a lot of like social justice comes from, where like a lot of it you can say is what people personally experienced, but then like now we can statistically prove that a lot of those things are true and are happening. All right, yeah. I think that there's ways to use AI as a tool, but this is saying that if you offload the entire thing, then you'll take no ownership of it, and your brain is not working. And I think that also that could be useful for work. Like, let me get into this. We'll talk about kind of the takeaways. All right, so cognitive debt is defined as reduced ownership of the written information and an inability to remember or recall the information. So that was part of it. Like, the LLM people couldn't remember what they had written, and they didn't take any ownership of it. When asked, like, how do you feel about this? They're like, I didn't write that. Like, they knew they didn't write it. But they say similar with the search. The search people took more ownership and they were better at remembering what they had written. But the brain only people, they had to come straight out of pocket with it. People who write from their memory have higher brain activity than people who search for sources, and much higher than LLM users. However, working from memory means that you have to already know the facts of any subject well, or you will come to erroneous conclusions. That was kind of my takeaways. Like, you have to know things. And that was actually put in, like, so with the name recognition stuff and the NLPs, which is natural language processing. So like, That was actually noted. That was like brain activity had a lot less actual sources. It used a lot less like proper nouns and stuff like that. It's a windy day. I got a jiggling door. All right, so all right. Yeah, erroneous conclusions. So, using search brings down brain activity more than writing from the mind, but the information has more inaccuracies and errors than using an LLM. Is this from poor interpretation or poor translation from reading to paraphrasing? So, the search engine group was paraphrasing, like they were reading something in search and then they were writing something, and that's what we're taught to do in essay writing is like, oh, take your notes, like paraphrase. Well, it seems that like there was a lot of inaccuracies recorded. So in paraphrasing, it seems that we, by synonymizing things, we probably turn the information into incorrect information. We understand it in a shallow way. So then when we try to transform it, we actually change that information, which is interesting because like that was the reason I kind of did this video, was because it bothered me. Like I saw a bunch of people talking about this thing and all they were using this study for was to say that AI makes you stupid. And like, A, that's not what the study is trying to say. And B, like you're not even diving into any nuance of what, like you're not, they didn't acknowledge whatsoever that there's a detriment in learning from search also. And I think that's something to be talked about here is like this study is optimizing for brain activity. If you're a student and you're trying to learn things, you need to be learning and writing essays the hard way to write this into your brain. If you're using ChatGPT to write your essays, you're not learning anything. And I think that's the main thing that needs to be taken away from this. This is talking about using LLMs in an educational setting, not in your daily life or your work life. But I think like as an artist, I say, if you want to take ownership from things, you have to do it yourself. So the things that you take the most ownership of are the things that you're going to do yourself. So I agree with that 100%. But yeah, like I didn't like the dishonesty of just saying like, oh, if you use AI, you're stupid. And that's kind of what mainly people were saying. And what I was just saying about that is that I wonder how much of this is like a paraphrasing, because if all you read is this headline, your brain on ChatGPT, accumulation of cognitive debt, and you actually, I didn't read 140 pages, but if you just read, 2 pages and barely dived into this and didn't have any nuance, then all you're taking away is the headline. Then yeah, sure, people who use ChatGPT are stupid. All right. If that's, you know what I mean? It's not, it's intellectually dishonest and it's bad paraphrasing. So yeah, there's cognitive debt in using search and taking notes. Or at least there's not as much cognitive debt, but there is a loss of information. And so like, this study is not looking for that, but like, I think it's important to note that like, a loss of information is important if we're talking about things that matter. Like if you're going to be writing, an opinion piece and you like are just straight up not including information, that could be problematic. And in the case of this, I'm including as much as information as I can without reading 140 pages to you. But also I'm providing you the 140 pages and another like 20-minute video to like understand this better if you don't believe me. Or not even just don't believe me. You want to just read it for yourself. Anyway, using search brings down brain activity more than writing from the mind, but the information has more in it. Okay, I just read that. Sorry. LLMs were more accurate, but also highly mirrored the text from search, plagiarism, unoriginal. Meaning like the LLMs, a lot of the stuff written by the LLMs had the same information. It was very, very like information, which I also have talked about a lot with AI. Like AI is the great averager. It is going to give you. It's basically a very, very complex word complete software. You know what I mean? That's essentially what it's doing. Is it's completing sentences. That leads me to believe that the creativity of paraphrasing from search is more accurate than writing from memory, probably because when writing from memory with knowledge you understand means you can put it in your own words without losing meaning. Creative writing around knowledge over word substitutions just to avoid plagiarism. So that's kind of going back a second to like, yeah, I think that this also leads me to believe that, like, you know, we talk a lot about how memorization isn't important, but I think that what this study does kind of show is that if you want to write about something, every creative writer knows that you write what you know. So it's the same with factual information. You want to write what you know, and the only way to know something is to experiment, research, read about others' experimentation and research, or others' like intellectual pursuits of the same avenues of knowledge. So by knowing things, by reading source material and studying source material, if you can't do experiments yourself, then you can then write from a place of knowledge, which is the highest form of brain activity and the highest form of like factual opinionated knowledge. Meaning opinions based in fact, because a lot of these, that's the other thing too with this study, a lot of the questions were opinion based. So it's not that the people who were doing brain only were at a disadvantage by not knowing the subject, because some of them were about, I guess you would say, moral or philosophical things that could be backed up with studies, but can also just be written from the mind or the heart. Yeah, reading through the prompts the participants were given. In a way, my notes kind of went along the line where I'm going already. So reading through the writing prompts that the participants were given, they seemed to be highly opinion-driven prompts, but could have the elements of facts based around statistics, meaning, etymology, philosophy, etc. And so all of the prompts could be done without references, but the references could make your research stats and vocabulary more rich. A funny note is that the search-only group had more inaccuracies than the LLM group, even though the prompts are heavily opinion-based. So when they did use references, they conveyed that information inaccurately. That keeps going back to, yeah, that was something that really stood out to me, is like, there is like, there's also that, what am I looking for here? That, it's exactly what the people who have been making a lot of these videos are doing. It's the confirmation bias. If you already think AI is stupid, this study tells you that AI is stupid. So I think there's some confirmation bias going into, you know, when you're writing from search without actually having read source material itself, or having knowledge of source material, because you're essentially going in with an opinion and you're looking for sources that will back that opinion, or in some cases you're reading information and then having it confirm your bias because you don't actually understand the information in a deep way. But like, the study isn't here to like break down all of that philosophical stuff. That's just kind of me reading into it. And that's kind of the point of the video I'm making. Like, you can go, you know, read the study and things and come up with your own opinions if you disagree with what I'm saying. I just wanted to get into a more nuance than like using AI makes you dumb. All right, so next notes. I think LLM usage should be used for research, but not for creative writing. It could be used to bounce ideas off of or test a creative theory against frameworks, but these should be thought about, cross-referenced, and not directly absorbed into the writing. I think by spending more time reading the output and absorbing the knowledge rather than copy-pasting and trusting the output without learning the information, the study points to free writing as the most creative and has the most cognitive activity and memory retention of the written information. And that might be because you already know it. Search being inaccurate and I mean, not everything, but oh yeah, if you're writing from your brain, you already know it. So of course, whatever you wrote, you're going to be able to recall a lot better because you were pulling from a knowledge source you already had. Search being inaccurate and LLM being most accurate, least creative, and leaving the most cognitive debt. The magic bullet brings down your own talent. Even after leaving it behind, it's harder to get that talent back due to the cognitive debt. I use the magic bullet reference here because it's like, I'm sure it's in many other stories, and I don't know, Tom Waits is getting it from somewhere, maybe Faust. I don't remember, but there's this idea of like, the magic bullet, and you have the magic bullet that never misses, and you only use them on really bad days, but all of a sudden every day is a bad day, and every day you need the magic bullet, and then you become dependent on the magic bullet, and so you're not actually a good gunsmith anymore, are you? Like, if you depend on the magic bullet. And I'm butchering that tale, but there you go, it's good enough. It's good enough to get this little point across. Anyway, so I what I said before, that's kind of the way I use AI. Like, I read a lot, I think about a lot of things, I have conversations with people, and often to really dive into a subject a bit more, I will have conversations with an LLM, especially when it comes to cross-referencing frameworks. So if I want to, think about something concerning crypto, under communist theory or Marxist theory, or like if I want to think about, or if I want to cross-reference like Marxist theory or feminist theory against indigenous theories, and different things like that. Like, if you want to have a non-emotional, logical conversation about things that are very, very knowledge-based, that you don't necessarily have a person to have that conversation with. I do have conversations with real people about these things, but sometimes it's easier to have conversations with an LLM about these things because there's no emotional attachment to the subject. And often the other thing is because, like, you can't be depended upon to be especially in things you're just now learning. Like, you can't be the source of information for the other person. So, and it's hard, like, they're not going to legitimize your knowledge just because you read a book or two and they didn't read that book. And so I've talked about this with a lot of my artist and writer friends in the past, that sometimes it's easier to write and it's easier to create videos. It's easier to just have the one-sided conversation, because the two-sided conversation often leads to semantic arguments, and you can never really get to, like, the conversation you were trying to have about the source of knowledge and, like, how things interact with each other, because there's such an argument over, like, choice of words and how the world should be. And it's because both sides are very attached to being right, and not being right, just for the sake of being right all the time, but being right in the sense that, like, if you're the person starting the conversation, you're kind of trying to get somewhere, and somebody else's hangups can, like, make it to where you never get to that point. And likewise, the person who's listening might be, right or wrong. Sometimes people don't want to go down the premise of your conversation because they might just fundamentally disagree with it. And so I think you can learn a lot by having intelligent conversations with an LLM, so long as you're having intelligent conversations and you're not just sniffing your own farts. You gotta be able to like source your own bias, source its bias. And, that's why it's important to have conversations with real people. And to only have these conversations with LLMs when you find that you're just not scratching the itch, or you don't have the person to scratch the itch, whatever. And like I said, read. Watch YouTube videos. Also, I think this taps into this study, something very important, and I've talked about this before, and I'll tap it again briefly. But when I say read, I do include audiobooks because I did have a bias that said, oh, reading is better than audiobooks. But it turns out, as far as knowledge retention goes, reading and audiobooks are on par. They're basically equivalent. The only difference really is two things. One is your ability to retain knowledge. Are you better at listening and paying attention and retaining it? Because if you're the type of person that like listens, but then like your brain goes off and you're not listening anymore, like I find I can be like that, where like I listen to audiobooks while I'm doing something, and then often I'll find I stop paying attention, and I'll have to go back. So when I'm paying attention, I do retain knowledge well. And there's a lot of books that I've read with my eyes and then also listened to in audiobook form, and I enjoyed doing that. They're different experiences, but as far as knowledge retention goes, not much of a difference. But the second part that I think is a difference, and this is that like I think doing something physically, it's kind of like writing. The reason they say like when you're reading, you should take notes and stuff like that, especially handwritten notes. There is measurable scientific studies on like the difference between handwriting notes and typing notes. There is a difference. And I think that there's a similar difference between reading and audiobooks in the sense that like when you're actually sitting there with the book, and maybe this is just my book bias because maybe I wouldn't feel this way necessarily about the Kindle. But I do read on my phone too, so I'm not biased in that sense. Like recently read Anarchism and the Black Feminist, and that I read that on my phone. And actually I read that and listened to the audiobook at the same time. And I noticed that audiobooks are slower than I read, which makes sense because saying a word out loud is slower than reading it. Anyway, that's my whole little foray into that. And I think that goes into this because what I was saying is that I think that the physical holding the book and the physical reading, the act of the eyes moving back and forth, might have something that obviously not memory, like knowledge retention. You can still learn from audiobooks, but maybe there is some more of a connection to the thing. And maybe it's not about knowledge retention, but an actual like recall of maybe not even the knowledge, but the way you felt while reading it. But I don't know, like, yeah, that is interesting because thinking about audiobooks, I first started listening to audiobooks like when I was at work and I was doing a very like physical manual labor job, but it did give me a lot of opportunity to just like put in my earphones as long as I was paying attention, and I could always hear what was going on around me. So like I do have a few select memories of like what I was doing while I was listening to a book, but like not anything specific, very vague. Like I remember listening to Slaughterhouse-Five while I was installing some pallet rack, but I can't remember. It's a vibe. Like I don't remember what company that was. I don't remember, time of year, anything. Like, and also Slaughterhouse-Five is a funny book to not have great memory recall on what's going on. Anyway, I think that there could be some relations here. Once again, not what the study's about, but there could be some kind of relation here between cognitive debt and memory retention, reading, audiobooks. Once again, not saying that audiobooks are lesser in any way. I love audiobooks. I use them all the time. I also love reading physical books. You see my stacks of books behind me. I'm always flipping through books. All right, let's get back to the notes. This kind of reminds me of the argument around audiobooks and reading. It has been found that there is no difference when it comes to information retention, with the only real difference being that it is easier to drift away while listening than reading, unless you're an overthinker like me. I will also do it during reading. I will be reading something and then realize that my brain went somewhere and I'm not my eyes are crossing over the page, but my brain is thinking about something I read or something else. So I can do it while reading too. Meaning it is a little bit harder to focus while listening to an audiobook because you will likely be devoting your body to another task and not focusing solely on the audio, which leaves opportunity to miss information. This seems similar in that when you let the LLM do more of the thinking and formatting, there is a deficit in your own cognition. Unless you make a conscious effort to engage with the LLM information in the same way you might engage with other search material. It seems to me the cognitive debt comes from allowing oneself to be lazy when using an LLM because the output is good enough. It takes a lot of self-control to have the magic bullet and only use it for research when it can give you the right answer right away, in the right format, and you move on with your day. And so I think there is something to interrupt my notes real quick. I think there is something to be said about that. Like, I'm just going to read my notes. Stop getting ahead of yourself. I think it is terrible for education, but could be a step in the right direction for most corporate busy work. Having things be fast, accurate, homogeneous, and not weighing down the psyche and the brain power of the human that has to do the task is great for work. Even if it is necessary for a person to learn and understand that information, there is no reason they have to be the creative author. They would just have to ensure the information is accurate, factual, and then learn the data for any uses they may have, like presentations, for instance. So for education and artistic purposes, it's better to do it as freehand as possible to achieve the most creative and self-honest piece of work in order to get what you need from doing the work, which in this case includes EEG activity. This study is optimizing your brain activity over accuracy and outcome. As an absorber of the written content, do I want information that is more accurate or more original? As a writer or creative, do I want more accuracy or ownership? And I'll answer those questions myself. So, like, for me, do I care if information comes from an LLM as long as it's accurate? Like, do I need it to be original? No, because as I was saying before with my frameworks, I am bringing the originality to the conversation. I am saying, hey, LLM, I know a lot about this theory, and I know a lot about this theory. How do these two theories, what is the Venn diagram here? What are the conflicts? And in a lot of cases, I've already come with my conflicts. This is another thing I do with LLMs. I already know what my conflicts are. Like, as a creative, I can think of, sci-fi horrific reasons why, this, that don't work or whatever. I can think creatively. I can think, I can think as an optimist, as a pessimist, and I can also, like, what I can't do, though, is be the great averager. So I don't feel like a lot of people feel the way I do about things. So I can't necessarily trust my intuition to be like, oh, everybody's going to do this or everybody would agree with this. Because, like, yeah, so like if I need an average, then I'm just going to look for statistics. I'm going to ask, and also I'm going to look to LLM because it's going to have the most average of information. And I'm going to say, hey, this thing and this thing, what's the Venn diagram of, how these things agree and disagree, et cetera, et cetera. And that's going to give me like a very average answer, average understanding of the two theories. And most people are going to understand it at that level, if not like more shallow. So, so in other words, point being, I'm bringing the creativity. I'm not asking an LLM to be creative for me. So I do want accuracy more than originality from an LLM. And I do want, like, if I'm getting information from a book, I do want accuracy, but I do understand also that every book is written with bias, which is why it's important to understand even the biases of the people that you like to read. The theory that you like to read has its own downfalls, and being aware of where those downfalls are is good if you're going to, you don't have to throw away the baby with the bathwater. There are people who have great ideas that also had bad ideas. And so you take the good ideas and you move forward into the new thing. And so, but as a writer or a creative, do I want more accuracy or ownership? Well, as a creator, I want more ownership. And to the level that I want that ownership to be accurate, I'm going to understand what the hell I'm talking about. So yeah, there you go. But these are questions that every person can ask themselves. And so I think overall, like, even their conclusion was essentially like, hey, more study needed. That is what they say at the end of the conclusion. Actually, I can throw that up real quick. Yeah, they say that at the end of the study. Let's jump to the conclusion. Yeah, I'll read y'all the conclusion and then we'll call it a G. As we stand at this technological crossroads, it becomes crucial to understand the full spectrum of cognitive consequences associated with LLM integration in educational and informational contexts. While these tools offer unprecedented opportunities for enhancing learning and information access, their potential impact on cognitive development, critical thinking, and intellectual independence demands a very careful consideration and continued research. The LLM undeniably reduced the friction involved in answering participants' questions compared to the search engine. However, this convenience came at a cognitive cost, diminishing users' inclination to critically evaluate the LLM's output or opinions, probabilistic answers based on the training data sets. This highlights a concerning evolution of the echo chamber effect. Rather than disappearing, it has adapted to shape user exposure through algorithmically curated content, which is ranked as top, is ultimately influenced by the priorities of the LLM's shareholders. Only a few participants in the interviews mentioned that they did not follow the thinking aspect of the LLMs and pursued their line of ideation and thinking. Regarding ethical considerations, participants who were in the brain-only group reported higher satisfaction and demonstrated higher brain connectivity compared to other groups. Essays written with the help of LLM carried a lesser significance or value to the participants, impaired ownership, see Figure 8, as they spent less time on writing, Figure 33, and mostly failed to provide a quote from their essays, Session 1, Figure 6, Figure 7. The human teachers closed the loop by detecting the LLM-generated essays as they recognized the conventional structure and homogeneity of delivered points for each essay within the topic and group. We believe that the longitudinal studies are needed in order to understand the long-term impact of the LLMs on the human brain before LLMs are recognized as something that is net positive for the humans. Yeah, so that's where we're at with that. I agree. Like, it was a small study. I do agree with everything the study came to. And I love a lot of the stuff that came out of reading it because, it wasn't the point of the study, but the understanding of, how search is also, there is some cognitive debt created in search. And it was interesting to see that. So, the motion sensor loves me. That was the back of the hand too. Like, it's supposed to be like open hand, I think is what turns it on, but it detected the back of my hand. So, yeah, like I said, I had a lot of takeaways there. Not refuting the study. We are pro-intellectualism. We are pro-science. And, but we also, that's why we read things for ourselves and look at things for ourselves. And, I could say anecdotally, I would agree that there's cognitive debt because, like, even in myself, like, I was doing the episode the other day where I was talking about, I had measured out in global like hectares or some kind of, yeah, it was, yeah, I don't even remember. Like, I had done a whole thing going back and forth with the LLM about something, but it was very quick. I didn't retain the information. I was just trying to like, have a conversation about something. So no, I didn't retain a lot of the information in a deep way. And so I can agree with that. Like, if you're just going back and forth with something to get quick answers, it's going to be hard to retain any information beyond the part you needed. And if you didn't actually need any of it, so like if you, for instance, like I've used AI to work on certain recipes, and but I memorized those recipes afterwards, or I memorized like a cooking procedure. So then I never had to use the AI again. So like, was there a cognitive debt there? If you use an LLM to learn a thing and you actually like commit that thing to memory, then there's no debt there. You've actually integrated something. So I think that what this tells us is like, hey, there is no easy way out of learning something. You can use the LLM for shortcuts, but anything that you use it for a shortcut, you're never going to learn that thing. So unless you like work to use that shortcut as experience and a teaching moment. So that could be something interesting, is like, how can we use AI to create experience rather than creating like book knowledge? Because that's some like an argument about education in general, is like, look, you don't learn how to be a doctor from book knowledge. Yeah, you have to get the degree before you get to like go on and learn experience, but like the reality any doctor would tell you is that you learn more by doing than you ever did in school. And that's with anything. You're not gonna learn to be a mechanic by reading mechanic books. You're going to learn some things, but until you actually get behind, get under the hood, you're not going to learn it. Same thing with, that was something I studied a lot of. Like, I have the sound and engineering book, and like I learned a lot about ranges and this and that and the other. But until you like go to mix an album, and then like even different, like I mixed a lot of music in small spaces and bars, and then I mixed a lot of music in the studio. But then like I started doing AV for conferences, and like doing AV for like not music is very different. When you just got these simple mic and you think it's like, oh, it's just people's voices, but it's like you're in these weird, awkward spaces. You're using like, bad equipment. Sometimes you're using like house sound for these hotels or whatever. And so like, you can have knowledge, and that knowledge needs to be worked out for every new experience. And so like, I am for like knowing things, but obviously like, it's kind of the reason, bringing this back to writing, for instance, like clearly the best way to write something is to deeply know that thing, and then to know it so well that you actually have kind of your own views and your own opinions. And that's where the best source material comes from, or that's where the best like alterations of source material, in a sense, like that's why I hate conspiracy theorists and flat earthers and those kind of people so much, because they ask really, like, they're asking these really dumb questions on the internet that like they can easily look up and get smarter about and have an understanding of the world. But like that won't get them clicks. Like asking dumb questions to a bunch of other dumb people will get them famous on the internet for like questioning NASA or whatever. And like it always comes down to like, it's like, oh, you could Google this, and they're like, oh, well, Google's been bought by the liberals, and like Wikipedia can't be trusted, and no sources of information can be trusted. And so that proves that the earth is flat, or lizards control the government, or whatever dumb shit. And Yeah, sorry. Thought terminating. All right. I'll see you again next time. Don't get caught up with too much cognitive debt out there, my friends.